Back then, 8 years ago, when I was reading your books, I was actually also parallelly reading Dan Brown. And even though both of your styles are very drastically different, but there's one
I see the
similar.
books to your side. I
Yeah.
see the book.
Yes. So there's one thin line that I felt was a little similar, was how fiction and facts go together in sort of both of your books. So I really wanted to ask you. We have talked about how much you read and how much you research. So it must be an exhaustive process. And I sometimes also write on the side, and I understand that if you're writing something that is very factual and it needs rechecking, how did you manage to stay on this track for so long? And I read in one of your interviews that you aim to write like 100 books. So what really drives you to write so much every day and in so much depth?
It's what I love. Yeah, it's what keeps me sane. I truly love writing, and I truly love reading. So somehow all the research, everything just remains in my mind. And my average rough ratio is, for every page that I write, I read at least 100 pages. That's my rough ratio. And when I'm writing fiction, then the knowledge, the research is just like ingredients. It's up to, because Lord Shiva kind of puts a story together, so it's up to him how it forms together in the story. I don't have to go back to refer. I don't do research while writing. Anything that I'm doing while not writing, in my mind, is research, right? So I keep reading all that. But while writing, no, I don't refer back. When I write non-fiction, then it's different. Then, of course, so I've written some non-fiction. I've written one non-fiction book. There'll be another non-fiction book coming out in a few months. So there, of course, yes, one refers. But while writing fiction, no. That knowledge is all there in the back, and it kind of comes together depending on how Lord Shiva wills it.
That's so wonderful to listen, because as a reader, I always imagined, people writing such detailed accounts would be like detectives, that they would, have a flow chart, go onto the board, and then write. So that's
I have nothing, no notes, no flow charts, nothing. And in fact, it's not just that I write a series. There are connections between different series. There are clues I'd left in Immortals of Melua, which released in 2010. Which were tied up in Ravan, which released in 2019.
Yes.
And I'll be lying if I say I had this master plan, and no, there's nothing like that. It all just remains in here, and somehow the connections just emerge. How it emerges, I don't know. It's Lord Shiva's magic. I just go with the flow.
Sandeep.
Yeah, no, I certainly don't need an introduction to Sandeep. I know him, and I've read some of his work, and I'm a fan. So, Sandeep, pleasure meeting you, man.
Thanks, Amish. Great speaking to you, and thanks very much for that talk. It's really eye-opening. And I must add that I did my ancient Indian culture from St. Xavier's, so history is part of mine. Wow. Yeah, just 2 years before you, I think. So my question, Amish, basically is on the way history is taught in schools. Now, my ICSE textbook from Bombay in the late 80s had exactly one chapter on the Cholas, Pandyas, Pallavas, and Rashtrakutas, right? And one of these empires had 1,000-year mercantile maritime. Yeah, the Chola, and it's there in your latest book, right? It's there in Suhail Dev. So my point is that do we need to reinterpret the way we are teaching history to our kids in schools and in colleges, free of a regional bias? I mean, I'm not speaking of it as, say, from someone from the south, but someone who is now looking back at dynasties that understood maritime commerce and expeditions and trade and the importance of all this. We are not teaching this to our present generation. So do you see a need to reinterpret the way we are looking at history, the way it's taught to us?
I have spoken of this a few times. In fact, I had written some articles on this also. It is desperately needed, for us to relook at our history. There are various problems with the way history is taught to us. One, as Sanjeev Sanyal, the principal economic advisor, had said once, that the history that is taught to us is more the history of our invaders rather than our own ancestors who fought those invaders, which is very bizarre. Most countries will study their own ancestors first. The second thing is an excessive Delhi bias in our history books. And this was of course there during British times, not as much, but it has got desperately accentuated in the last 70 years. Perhaps because most of the historians, came from Lutyens' Delhi, so that they just wrote of what they saw, and what they thought was the center of the Indian subcontinent. I'm not denying the importance of Delhi. It is of course a very important region of India, but it is not the only important region of India. There are many other regions, and it's not just the south that is ignored. Western India is ignored, Central India is ignored, Eastern India is ignored, Northwestern India is ignored. Raja Suheldev was from Central UP.
Yes.
He's also ignored. And if you see the way our history books were, unless an empire had its base in Delhi, you'll notice on average it's been wiped out from our history books. Except for a few cases where the empire was so massive that it couldn't be ignored. The Mauryas, their center was Bihar. But they were too massive to be ignored because they are the biggest empire ever in Indian history. And in terms of population, perhaps and as a population, as a percentage of the globe, perhaps one of the biggest ever, right? And in India, subcontinent, certainly, the biggest ever. They couldn't be ignored, even though their center was in Delhi. Too big to be ignored. Guptas, again, their center was Bihar, but again, too big to be ignored, right? But you notice outside of that, if an empire like the Cholas, for example, Rajendra Chola's empire was bigger than that of Akbar's, right? He controlled all of South India, all of East India, Sri Lanka, most of Southeast Asia. So his empire was bigger than Akbar's. You won't get that impression by reading our history books. Right? Depending on how you measure it, the third biggest or the fourth biggest empire ever in India were the Marathas. But again, completely airbrushed out of our history books, right? Because their center wasn't Delhi. The Pandyas, the Cheras, the Hoysalas, the Rashtrakutas, the Gurjar Pratiharas were, and the ones I listed till now were the south. Gurjar Pratiharas were Gujarat, Maharashtra. That was their base, so they expanded a lot out. The Palas, who were Bengal, based off Bengal, but had conquered much of India. The Karkotaks from Kashmir, Maharaja Ranjit Singh. How much is written? You'll notice anyone who didn't have a base in Delhi whose center wasn't Delhi. The Mughals were of course massive; they should be covered. But Lothis were glorified zamindars, bhai. Why are they given so much airtime? Correct. Whereas Marathas and others are ignored. So there's an excessive Delhi centricity among all our establishment historians. This needs to be challenged for the good of India. Because it is not fair. There are other parts of India too, boss. And I'm saying again, this complaint is not just from the south. It is from every region which is more than 100 kilometers away from Delhi. Okay. They've just been ignored. And so one, fairness. Second, it gives us a very inadequate understanding of our history. Because our history books are so Delhi centered, we think India has actually been an agrarian land-based culture. No, India was largely a maritime culture. We were the biggest traders for most of human history. We were the center of the Indian Ocean trade routes, which was the center of global trade. Right? Logical reason for it, because we keep being told that the Silk Route was where most trade happened. अरे यार camels oxen पे कितना आप carry करोगे भाई? You can't have a big trade route based on camels, right? For big massive trade you need ships. Okay, and the Indian Ocean is the only ocean in the world where the winds change direction. Okay, the only one. all other oceans, winds go only in one direction. So before steam engines emerged and it was all wind-based sailing, this was a huge competitive advantage for Indian Ocean because you could set up an annual round trip. It is not possible in any other sea. In the Mediterranean Sea, you needed slaves, in galleys to row. In India, why did India not have slaves in ancient times? Megasthenes wrote, right? That slavery was very common. Slavery came to India with the Turks, actually. We didn't have slavery in ancient India. Megasthenes wrote of it. And I'm not trying to say we were more moral. Okay. It's just that slavery wasn't so much used in farming pre-American times. When the mass things happened. Slavery was used in shipping to row.
The galleys.
Right? The galleys. And you needed to row because you couldn't depend on the wind. Whereas Indian Ocean, the only ocean in the world where the winds change direction, northeast monsoon, southwest monsoon, you can set up an annual round trip. You didn't need slaves. You could just use the... So the point is, we were a massive trading nation because of our geopolitical advantages. You don't get this impression reading our history books.
Absolutely not. Our books
you think we're a land-based, hum to kisano ke desh the. That is the only impression you get. Correct? Because we've ignored all our trading. The Mughals didn't have ships. Oh, that's because they came from Central Asia, boss. And the Mughals weren't Indians. They were foreigners. They were Turks. They didn't call themselves Mughals. They called themselves Temuriya. We call them Mughal. They were descendants of Temur. That's what they call themselves. So the point is, there are real impacts of history being taught to us in this way. It's not just unfairness. We have an inadequate understanding of our own history, of our own selves. And because we don't see ourselves as a trading nation, you'll notice trading nations tend to be more outgoing, more confident, more because, you naturally engage with other cultures. You're not defensive. You're outgoing. You're pushing out. Whereas we don't have that self-image. Like when pre-1991 we chose socialism and chose to withdraw from trade, withdraw from the world, no one argued saying, boss, you're going against 5,000 years of our culture. Because we didn't see ourselves as traders. We see ourselves as Delhi-focused farmers.
Farmers, that's right.
As an agrarian society. There's a real impact of our history as well. It's not just fairness. It's not just about fairness. It needs to be rewritten. Certainly needs to be rewritten.
Thanks so much, Amish. I think you've answered my question perfectly. Thanks.